Well, welcome to all of the folks coming in on uh, YouTube at a later time. Uh, I want to reflect today on these three momentous images that we have in the screensaver. And they're from the 60s, which is 50. It's really where we talk about the things that are almost 60 years previous, before some of you were born, but not most of you. Most of you were around for the 60s, which was another turbulent time. We're going to be really working with these images and hopefully recognize a whole new view based on them that will not only make sense of national and global turbulence that we're currently experiencing, but also give a sense of hope. And that's where the inspiration comes in. I get a lot of hope from these images, and really, in working on this talk, I got more and more hopeful, which is sometimes a hard commodity to come by, when times are dark. Uh, so making sense and having a hopeful view, a new view, in terms of this kind of turbulence we're going through now. As the Tibetans are fond of saying, and this is a great saying, put it somewhere on the wall of your heart. Recognition and liberation are simultaneous. Somehow, when we recognize um, what's getting in the way, it's a kind of freedom, and it happens almost right away. And really, that's the practice of formal meditation over and over again. All of a sudden, you realize something's getting in the way, let it go, free of that. So, we're going to try to get free of an old view. We're going to recognize an old view that's still, unfortunately, uh, in effect on this planet. And at least for us, the recognition of a new view uh, will give us a little sense of liberation. And that's where it all starts. The planet can't be any freer than the people on it. Yeah. So three parts today. It's a three-part that I'm going to talk about a new view of the Earth and outer space that came about. We're going to have to go back to the old view a little bit, and then we'll talk about a new view of inner space, and finally a kind of view of this current turbulence. Okay, in light of these things. So a new view of Earth and outer space. Well, Magellan uh, circumnavigated the globe in 1519. He set off from Spain in 1519 and went all the way around in 3 years, stopping at a lot of interesting places. And that was a new view. I mean, yeah, Columbus, in 1492 sailed the ocean blue, but really he bumped into the Bahamas and Haiti, and he thought it was India. That's why they called natives Indians to this day. He was mistaken. He thought he had reached the East. He was betting on that the globe was circular and not flat. So it was really quite a gamble. But when he ran into the Bahamas and the Arawak Indians in Haiti, he called them Indians. He thought he was in India. He was wrong. But Magellan later, a couple decades later, he actually followed that thing and actually went around, ended up back in Spain. So that's the early 16th century. It's called the Age of Discovery, and they were all trying to claim these places as we discovered them, we own them, kind of thing. It's also the beginning of a kind of global colonial system, but it was really discovered that we were living on a round globe. Now, 20 years after Magellan did this, uh, this wise sort of crazy Polish guy, Nicholas Copernican, by looking at the stars, we're starting to invent better instruments. Looking at the stars and doing the math, he said, "Hey, we're not circling this. the sun isn't circling us, and the stars aren't moving around us. We're moving around the sun. That was a Copernican revolution, and it was a huge revolution. The whole Middle Ages, the whole view of the Middle Ages was that we were on a flat surface, and there was all these various crystalline orbs over us, 7 different ones, like semicircles over us, and there's little uh, holes in them, pinprick holes in these orbs, and that's what letting the sun in and all this kind of stuff. And of course, God was out there, but the Earth was circling around the sun, not the other way around, and that shook up everything. The whole model for the cosmos fell apart, not quickly. And even, there are still people in the whole Earth Society, some famous basketball players perhaps, but most people realize now that no, the sun is our star, and we're circling it with a whole bunch, a bunch of other planets. And that was a shakeup that it just shook the Middle Ages to its core. Of course, Galileo, he agreed with Copernicus, and he got, put down by the Catholic Church, but it shook everything up. Everything was in motion, you see. Now, the picture on the left there is the picture of Earthrise, was taken by, I think it was Apollo 8 took that picture. And interestingly enough, and this will tie into what's in the middle, interestingly enough, that was on December 24th, New Year's Eve in 1968. And if you remember being in 1968, it was a hell of a year. Talk about turbulence. I mean, I had to avoid getting gassed at the Democratic convention. There was military guys in the street. I went down to pick up Pam after she was a secretary at DePaul. I went down to pick her up, and we were going to hang around and sneak into convention sites and eat food. And when I got there and came up from the train, there was these guys in gas masks, and you could smell, your eyes start burning because they were. It was wild. 68. So this date actually, December 24th, was absolutely 2 weeks to the day after Thomas Merton died in Bangkok. So there's a lot going on. Bobby Kennedy killed, Martin Luther King killed, Merton killed or died from a mishap. Just incredible. Going to every bit as turbulent as it is now. It might be hard for younger people to realize that, but yeah, everything was up for grabs. Now the other picture, Apollo 11, because we were really going into space at that time as a country. We were exploring. Apollo 11 took the whole Earth picture, became famous, and that was in July of 1969, for about 8 months later. So we were really cooking in terms of really trying to figure out what was going on in the cosmos. And of course, Neil Armstrong, that's one when he actually stepped on the planet. So that's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Well, 56 years later, we're still on the edge of that giant leap. We haven't quite taken it. What will it look like if we actually leap into a wholly new view of our place in the cosmos? And wholly is there's sort of pun intended, because we've known for 56 years that this is one planet. And there are no boundaries you can see in that picture. There's no borders to be defended. And that we're also, as Buckminster Fuller said, we're on the spaceship Earth. There's no out, you can't get off this ship. You can take a few trips up, with Elon Musk or something, but you come back down. And when is that going to really sink in that we're one planet? A lot of different, it's like 31 flavors in terms of ethnic stuff, 31,000 flavors in terms of ethnic stuff, shades of skin color. That all means something to us still. That's crazy. Alan Watts was one of my favorite guys, again, in the 60s and the 70s. He says, well, the way that an apple tree produces apples He says an apple tree apples. It's appling all the time. He says it's the same way the earth produced people. The earth is peopling. So we are of the earth. And it doesn't matter where you're born and how much melanin you have in your skin or, what kind of unique uh, customs that you have and what kind of languages you speak. We're all fruits of that same planet. And when will that sink in? All right, so that's what we've got ahead of us, and so I think I can turn the screensaver off now because we've all had a peek at it. All right, well, so that's sort of the new view that we got based on our. It's basically really it's imprinted on our soul. We want to explore. Those of you who read the Whole Brain Living book, that's a characteristic of our deep imprint in what we call the soul, but it seems to have this longing to explore and know, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Okay. Now, part two is a new view of inner space. The problem is uh, we've disconnected our inner space and just reflect on it for like a millisecond, you realize in your inner space, a lot is going on there. If you read the Whole Brain book, there's a lot of conversations going on. There's the we inside of me is at least four other entities, character one, two, three, and four, and they're all commenting. And so we know about inner space, especially when you in the next segment where we sit in meditation and at least for a little bit shut our eyes so that outer space, at least the visual part of it, is cut off. Then all of a sudden the voices. Yeah. So we need a view of inner space. Now, here's a really amazing quote. It's by Arnold Toynbee, who was a student who wrote a study of history, 12 volumes, Britisher. And he said something in an interview one time. It's not actually in the book, but it was in an interview that really caught my attention because he had looked at history from as far back as he could go to. He was writing in the 20th century, and he opined that the most important event of the 20th century will not be either World War nor the dropping of the atomic bomb, but rather the meeting of Buddhism and Christianity. Very interesting. And the guy was, he wasn't that far into it to see, and he really, but the meeting of East and West inner science. Okay. Now, the picture we had in the middle of the two, the Earthrise and the Whole Earth, was a picture of Merton and His Holiness the Dalai Lama taken. He went to meet the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala, taken there after their third meeting. It was a week of November, first week in November, November 4th to 8th. Merton came on November 4th, and he was checking out lamas all over the place, from mountaintop to mountaintop, including lamas that had taught the Dalai Lama. And so he had the Dalai Lama on the schedule, but he wasn't that interested. He thought he was more interested in these hermit lamas. And he thought, the Dalai Lama was a bit like the Pope of Buddhism, and he just thought it would be, talking about the institution, which Merton was realizing was falling apart. But it was a surprise. They both hit it off, 2-hour meeting, and that was all they had scheduled. But after this meeting, the Dalai Lama came out, famously said to his secretary, he says, I think a Christian could be enlightened. What? The guy said, really, Your Holiness? He said, yeah, I think I just met one. He said, get this guy back. And so they connected with Merton. He came back on the Wednesday and the Friday. So they met for 6 hours total. Might be 6 hours that changed the world. That's what I think. Because what we really had, and they didn't really realize it at the time, but we had the deepest, two of the deepest guys from the two deep contemplative traditions of the East and West connect. For me personally, I feel it's almost as if the planet knew it was needed because we needed to have the view of inner space. And both of these guys were from contemplative traditions. And Buddhism is almost totally a contemplative tradition, but it was made into a religion, which it never was intended to. And then, of course, I grew up Catholic. We know what that is. Uh, and so, but this meeting, I think, that picture, I have that picture in a couple places in this house. And for me, it was, and I didn't even know who Merton was. The first time I went to, it was one of the great Catholic universities in this country anyway, and I never heard of Thomas Merton, and I didn't know what a monk was. That was me in 1968. I was a sophomore at Notre Dame. So we're trying to catch up to what was going on. Now, Merton went from there down to Ceylon and or which is now Sri Lanka, and he went to these huge stone carvings of the Buddha and had his second enlightenment experience, which really deserves a whole talk in itself because she was moving on. Merton was moving in inner space, and now he was moving in outer space in the sense of moving through Asia. And then from there he went to Bangkok, and he had this second great illumination there just a week before he was going to graduate from this incarnation. Little did he know he saw this picture of what he called the sleeping Buddha, who was laid out on the horizontal, but really that was the Buddha who was going into what they call parinirvana, or graduating into the next thing, and he called it the sleeping Buddha, and he certainly wasn't aware that he was about ready to transition. Okay, and his last talk to a bunch of monks in Bangkok, mostly Trappist and Benedictine men like him, but there was a few Benedictine sisters there, and one of them was running the tape recorder who was really digging Merton, although the men mostly didn't. Interesting, and it was the only time it was ever filmed. Italian film company filmed him, and she was running the sound, and the sound is, boy, it's not good. But she was listening to Merton. You could see it in her eyes. Every once in a while, they showed her in the footage, and she was picking up on what he had to say. Well, I want to just read an excerpt of what he said because it's the most mature Merton you're going to get. So I'll just read you some cuts from this. He said because he'd met Chogyam Trungpa, who was a young monk at that time, a Buddhist teacher, and just kind of crazy wisdom Tibetan guy. He was the first guy to really bring Tibetan Buddhism to North America. Well, he met him in a bar in Calcutta, and they had spent the whole day together. It's like almost like a joke about two monks meeting in a bar, but he was impressed by him. And so Merton's quoting him in this his talk to the guy. He was talking about Marx and monasticism, because he saw both as a critique of the current dominant culture, which is war, making money, still is, obviously. We got to grow out of this. But and so he really heard something from Trungpa, because Trungpa had to flee Tibet as a little boy. I mean, Tibet had 6,000 monasteries and 7 million people at the time the Chinese came in. It has 4 monasteries still intact now. The rest were destroyed. And so, he's quoting him. He said, he's talking to the audience, and he said, forget everything else that has been said here today. I suggest you remember this for the future. From now on, everybody stands on his own feet. Trungpa told him that. That's what he learned about seeing all the structures of Tibetan Buddhism fall away. From now on, everybody stands on his own feet. And so Merton goes on, he says, we can no longer rely on being supported by structures that may be destroyed at any moment by political power or political force. Man, is he a prophet? If you think about what's going on in this country and around the world, we can no longer rely on being supported by structures that it may be destroyed at any moment by political power or political force. You cannot rely on structures. The time for relying on structures has disappeared. And then towards the end of that talk, he said the whole purpose of life is to learn how to live by love. And at the end of the talk, his last words was, he said, "Well, we'll meet after lunch to have a panel, and you can say what you thought about this." And then his very last words, last four words anybody ever heard him speak anyway. He says, "And now I'll disappear," and it's like a movie or something. And then he did. He did. Yeah, he left the body one way or another, and now I'll disappear. So, there's a lot in there. Could no longer rely on being supported by structures. And it is part of the turbulence that we're going to finally is, when you see what's been done in 9 months in this country in terms of structures, law, education, all of this stuff, the structures have been disabled or blown away. The Congress, passing laws, law itself. And he said, and this is a positive thing, what he's saying, from now on, everybody stands on his own feet. And that's actually how we started, because we rejected the structure of monarchy and we're going to rebuild something new. Yeah, he's very prophetic. And that was, 57 years ago. And we're just now catching up to it. Now, for a little bit of a hopeful view, weird view, but a hopeful view of this current turbulence, and this for me is hopeful. Quote from Joseph Campbell, and this is Campbell in 71. He's right in his prime, and he's still got a couple of decades to go, but he was looking at the world. Kent State had happened by this time, where National Guard actually shot American students. Well, we get people being shot now. Anyway, this is what Campbell said. He's relating to this, the pictures that of the whole earth, especially. He said, there were formerly horizons within which people lived and thought and mythologized. There are now no more horizons. And with the dissolution of horizons, we have experienced and are experiencing collisions, terrific collisions, not only of people, but also of mythologies. I think it is improper to become hysterical about it, projecting hatred and blame. It is inevitable. Altogether, it is an inevitable, altogether natural thing that when energies that have never met before come into collision, each bearing its own pride, there should be turbulence. What is occurring is completely natural, as are its pains, confusions, and mistakes. So he was seeing things from when he studied the world mythology, so he had really a whole view of how people made sense from the early animal spirit mythologies to mythology we have about this country, and the mythologies of the great religions. Mythology doesn't mean something that's not true. It just means a system of trying to understand this. And he saw them all, and he said that again, it went with the dissolutions of horizons. We have experienced and are experiencing collisions, terrific collisions, not only of peoples, but also of mythologies. I mean, the internet right here, dissolution of horizons. I mean, I can't see to France from here, but Vivian can be here and we can share things together. So the horizons have collapsed, and especially when you see the whole Earth, you see we're all connected. The horizons separated us. Horizon, another word for horizons are boundaries. You see, and well, artificial uh, national boundaries. Even this mythology of the nation state, the mythology that guys are, wearing on their hats, make America great again. The mythology that it was ever great for everybody or anybody. Greatness is down the road for all of us, all people on the planet, because we're still, people still starving, people killing in wars, but evolution is slow and it depends on the view. Recognition and liberation is simultaneous. And so if you have the inside of human beings connected with the view of the outside, and we need that, we need to evolve into that more and more. But he said, this is completely natural, as are the pains and confusion and mistakes as mythologies collide. What we've had since 2001, September 11th in this country, we've had this collision of Christianity and Islam. And now we have a collision of Judaism and, and Islam too in the Middle East. And, Putin has his own mythology. And in that mythology, Ukraine has always been Russian. So, uh, you know, this is why we're living in a turbulent world. But he said this is just part of it, and to have a bigger view of it, because something new is going to come out of this. That's what I take from it. Something new is going to come out of it. Things, the end of the Heart Sutra, the Buddhist kind of Our Father for the Zen community, wrapping 84,000 teachings of the Buddha into one prayer, just like Our Father has become that for the Jesus movement. It ends with Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhisvaha. And the way I render that is fall apart, everything falls apart, the whole shebang falls apart. Hallelujah. Now that I didn't understand it at first, but what needs to die? You have to say something needs to die before something new is born. And even in cultures like our culture, and it doesn't mean the whole thing has to be annihilated. No, but I mean this idea of the apocalypse and the end of the world didn't really mean literally the end of the world. It meant the end of this inner world the way we saw things. See, and that's a good thing, because that's also a meaning of the virgin birth. If you take it mythologically, that when anybody who's ever been in the 12 steps can tell you that view, when I was addicted to whatever, it had to hit bottom and crumple up before I could have an entirely new view. The world looks differently after you hit bottom and you bounce back up via the 12 steps or any other kind of practice you see. So I have a totally hopeful view of what's going on. Not that there won't be pains, confusion, and mistakes along the way, but I'm hopeful that 30 people get together here today to even listen to this. Yeah, I'm hopeful about this community.